the book, we would like to invite the author himself, Geoffrey Shore. Please come to stage.
Xin quý vị một tràng pháo tay thật lớn để đón chào tác giả của cuốn sách The Mandate of the Gospel.
Thanks very much for coming out and buying the book. And I want to say that just looking out here, it's obvious that we need to get a Vietnamese version of the book and a French version, as I think it was good. Rather than go through the history, and it's a sad history, the betrayal of Diem, I'm going to tell you just briefly how I came through this history. I wasn't a specialist in Vietnamese history, but I came to it from a side angle. It was very strange how things developed. As a military historian, one of my, like Robert Thompson, who wasn't very interested in armies, what makes them work, what makes them fail. And so as an outside reader, I have the standard narrative before me that, well, the U.S. Military and the Army failed. But as I looked, that's what drew me in, and I heard, okay. But then the closer I got, I saw that wasn't true. What was true was that there was a political problem. And then I heard the popular narrative about Diem, the ruthless, corrupt dictator, like we were talking about Serrano or maybe Marcos in the Philippines. But then what really caught my eye and really drew me in was the first thing I came across. This was a man who was up for Mass every morning at 6:30, and I said, well, how can a corrupt dictator who's just after money and stuffing his own pockets be bothered to be up at 6:30 in the morning? Slowly I got drawn into this. This was when I was doing my master's work. And what struck me, what struck me was the fact that none of the popular narrative added up with whom the man appeared to be. And then, as I worked more and more on this, and I actually wanted to get away and get back to regular military history, I kept getting drawn in further. And then I met, I think first down at the U.S. Air Force Special Ops School in Florida, it was back in the early 90s. I met General Nguyen Thanh, who knew Diem quite well. And I interviewed him at length, partly in French, partly in English. And what came out was the minute I said to him, so what was it about Ngô Đình Diệm that had this effect on people? And immediately, he said, his whole appearance changed. He suddenly became very, very serious. And he said it was because of his purity. He was pure. He was a pure, and he had no chasing, there was no chasing of money in the man. That's not what he was about. And of course, this came out along the way too. The other people told me, when people were coming down from the north, when refugees were coming down in 1956 from the north, and people needed money, he would simply give out of his own pocket. He always gave. If even the guards and the POWs, anybody had a problem, money came out of his own pocket. So he wasn't after money grabbing, he was giving away. And everything he did seemed to be, when we look back at his history, even as a village chief, he always gave his time, everything. And this is what he did as president. It was actually Khan who told me that he slept in his office and had nothing to do with the ostentatious life. And this, of course, came together not from one source, but from many sources. So as this was going on, I just felt compelled to write about this because a great injustice had been done. Virtually through the popular news media and organs like New York Times and the Washington Post. Great damage was done by men who didn't even understand this man. They wrote about him as if he was some kind of dictator from the web, like a Westerner would write about a dictator, but none of it was true, none of it added up. And especially as you got him behind the scenes, and then of course, with what Ambassador Nolting had to say about him. There were many fine Americans who supported Diem when it cost them bitterly, including, yes, Nolting and General Lansdale. And I think Colby, at a certain point, Bill Colby realized he had to distance himself. He told the truth about Diem too. So from afar off, I came to the story. I had no vested interest in who did what in Vietnam to who. I came basically as a blank slate when it came to that, and it helped me see through all the problems that were in the regular historiography of the Vietnam War and what had been written about President Diem. And the more and more and more I looked, the more I was drawn, and I couldn't get away from it, so I wound up doing my doctorate. But it seems that he stood at the center of history in terms of post-45 Vietnam, and that with him, Vietnam basically come together under terrible circumstances in the post-45 era, from up to about 63, when the rug was pulled out of him by very powerful forces in the White House, and particularly Avro Harriman. And I just came to see that this story had to come out, and that's what I tried to do. The rest is in the book, and I really think we need it in Vietnamese too. Thank you very much for coming.
Dạ kính thưa quý vị, là một diễn viên thì chắc được huấn luyện để nói to lớn hơn, nhưng mà đây là một giáo sư đại học rất là hiền, thành nói rất là nhỏ, thiếu ráng thiếu nghe, nhưng mà có nhiều chữ Hiếu không hiểu, thành ra không dịch được. Kính thưa quý vị, để tiếp tục chương trình, chúng tôi xin được hân hạnh giới thiệu người đại diện cho Ngô Đình Diệm Foundation, anh Lê Tinh Thông. Xin mời anh.
Xin mời giáo sư Lê Tinh Thông. Dạ thưa quý vị biết là giáo sư Lê Tinh Thông là một người rất là hoạt bát trong cộng đồng của chúng ta. Tôi biết được ông từ lúc mà ông đã dạy ở trường trung học tại Valley High School, và từ đó lời đó chúng tôi vẫn là học trò, mặc dù tôi không học ở đó nhưng mà tôi biết là thầy dạy ở đó, cho nên chúng tôi gọi là thầy Lê Tinh Thông. Và ông cũng đóng góp trong rất nhiều các tổ chức, từ tôn giáo sang tới chính trị cũng như là xã hội bên ngoài cộng đồng. Và một lần nữa chúng tôi xin quý vị một tràng pháo tay cho diễn giả của chúng ta ngày hôm nay, đó là giáo sư Lê Tinh Thông.
Kính thưa quý vị trưởng thượng, quý quan khách, các bạn trẻ và quý đồng hương thân mến, thân thành cảm ơn tất cả quý vị đã đến tham dự cái buổi ra mắt và để khích lệ tinh thần của tiến sĩ Geoffrey, người đã thực hiện cái kiệt tác phẩm này. Và xin quý đồng hương cho phép tôi được phát biểu bằng Anh ngữ. Dear Dr. Shaw, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen, more than half a century ago, then took place a tragic coup d'etat, or rather, an abominable plot to assassinate President Ngô Đình Diệm and his brother and advisor, Ngô Đình Diệm. Shortly after that shameful revolt, his second brother, Ngô Đình Cẩn, was condemned to death after a hasty and unfair trial with multiple fabricated accusations. President Ngô Đình Diem's assassination led to the inevitable collapse of South Vietnam into communist hands on April 30th, 1975. What's currently happening in Vietnam now has proved the analytical vision, rather a prophecy, of Mr. Ngô Đình Diệm, taking shape at the present time. In his anonymous political training documents called Critical Issues of Vietnam, Mr. Ngô Đình Diệm had declared that if South Vietnam should fall into the communist regime, the Chinese invasion of the entire country would simply a matter of time. Actual Chinese presence in Vietnam has been mysteriously expanding at a rapid pace over the last 40 years of supreme communist authority. Ladies and gentlemen, in the Catholic Church, Holy Week has just transpired, and it culminated in the passion and resurrection of Jesus Christ. The title of Dr. Geoffrey Shaw's book has prompted me to draw an analogous comparison between the death of Jesus and that of President Ngô Đình Diệm. Both of them were betrayed and mercilessly tortured, and ultimately both were murdered. The analogy is quite fitting because Dr. James Shaw, a Jesuit professor emeritus at Georgetown University, in his introduction to Dr. Shaw's book, reflects on the brutal murder of President Ngô Đình Diệm. He writes, "This killing always seemed to me to be closer to martyrdom than a political murder. But there is no reason it could not have been both." Also in his foreword, Dr. James Shaw is logical to declare that many rulers chosen by the Confucian mandate of heaven or by aristocratic or tribal means turn out to be decent public guides. President Diem gained an advantage over other respectable leaders observed by Dr. James Shaw because he was also a devout Catholic. According to his niece, Mrs. Elizabeth Nguyen, here with us today, President Diem always carried a white rosary in his jacket pocket. Elizabeth still preserved this valuable relic of his memory among her family's possessions. Moreover, President Diem used to attend the Holy Mass almost every day during his presidency. On November 2nd, 1963, he even risked his life to go to a church in the neighborhood of his hideout. He wanted to attend the Holy Mass on the Feast of All Souls before he quietly and humbly surrendered himself to his traitors. According to Dr. Philip Jennings in his book, The Politically Incorrect Guide to Vietnam War, on July 7, 1959, the New York Times commemorated the 5 years of Diem's presidency, proclaiming, "A 5-year miracle, not a plan, has been carried out. Vietnam is free and is becoming stronger in defense of its freedom and of ours. There is reason today to salute President Ngô Đình Diệm." Ladies and gentlemen, for so long the whole world has been seemingly blindfolded from the raw facts behind President Diem's murder. We, the Vietnamese people, would like to thank Dr. Shaw wholeheartedly for dedicating many years of deep and thorough research, studies, and interviews in order to bravely publish this historical masterpiece, The Last Mandate of Heaven, the American Betrayal of Ngô Đình Diệm, President of Vietnam. Dr. Shaw, you have bravely proclaimed this historic truth on behalf of Vietnamese people living in exile as political refugees throughout the world. And for at least 80% of our compatriots still living in Vietnam, continuing to suffer greatly under barbaric communist oppression. Dr. James Shaw, again in his foreword, partially unveils what we are looking for. He writes, "In this book, Canadian scholar Geoffrey Shaw has given us a candid account of the killing of Ngô Đình Diệm, the reason for it, who was responsible, why it happened, and the disastrous results. It is not a happy story, except in the sense that here we finally have a clear picture of the event and the personages surrounding this assassination." We strongly encourage you to take a copy of Dr. Shaw's book and explore an extremely credible account of President Ngô Đình Diệm assassination, and recommend the book to your friends, colleagues, history teachers, professors, relatives, and anyone interested in the real truths surrounding the Vietnam War. In the conclusion of his book, Dr. Shaw mentions the fact that Vice President Lyndon Johnson, livid with anger over the murder of Diem, did little to hide his contempt for those who had a hand in it. In 1966, as president, he confided to Senator Eugene McCarthy for what the Kennedy administration had done to President Diem back in 1963. He said, "We killed him. We all got together and got a goddamn bunch of thugs, and we went in and assassinated him." Ladies and gentlemen, after 40 years of dictatorial domination of the so-called unified or liberated Vietnam, there are constant barbarous persecutions and oppression of brave political dissidents and defenders of human rights escalating in our beloved country, which are condoned and even carried out by the corrupt Vietnamese Communist government. Even the United States government, even after the United States government reestablishment of diplomatic relations with Vietnam's membership in the World Trade Organization and recently in the TPP trade agreement of 2015, the communist regime has deteriorated in many aspects, especially in the education, healthcare, and the welfare of its people in rural and remote areas. The U.S. administration under three presidents, President Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and currently President Barack Obama, as a gesture of reconciliation and repentance, at least by appearances, has extended their friendly handshakes to the Vietnamese communist leaders with promises of humanitarian aid, business investments, diplomatic and commercial exchanges, on the condition that they would cease the violations of human rights and release on prisoners of conscience. Unfortunately and contemptibly, the communists are liars by nature and strict upbringing. They do not keep their promises, nor any engagements that contradict their atheist ideologies. Similarly, during his recent so-called historic trip to Cuba, President Barack Obama delivered an eloquent speech to challenge the communist Cuban leaders to enact change. He declared, "So let me tell you what I believe. I can't force you to agree, but you should know what I think. I believe that every person should be equal under the law. Every child deserves the dignity that comes with education and healthcare and food on the table and roof over their heads. I believe citizens should be free to speak their mind without fear and to criticize their government and to protest peacefully. And that the rule of law should not include arbitrary intentions of people who exercise their rights. I believe that every person should have the freedom to practice their faith peacefully and publicly. And yes, I believe voters should be able to choose their government in free and democratic elections. Not everybody agrees with me on this. Not everybody agrees with the American people on this. I believe those human rights are universal. I believe they are the rights of the American people, the Cuban people, and people around the world." Ladies and gentlemen, we suspect President Barack Obama will make similar remarks when he visits our homeland Vietnam in May this year. But without consistent and serious enforcement of United Nations directives and US demands in compliance with international regulations, and without any impunity measures, the Vietnamese communists will go on maliciously cheating the international community again. Absolutely no more NATO policy. That is, no action, talk only. In conclusion, I would like to invoke the same greeting of the resurrected Jesus Christ to his disciples. Peace be with you all, ladies and gentlemen. And as a gesture of gratitude and warm welcome to Dr. Shaw, I would like to quote Marcus Tullius Cicero, a writer, a politician, and a great Roman orator, as follows. Anybody can make history. Only a great man can write it. As a memorable tribute to you, Dr. Shaw, I respectfully and personally present to you this unique souvenir of this special book signing event honoring you and your tireless work. Very sorry it is broken, so that while we trying to set it up. So I hope that you and your children can fix it easily when you get home. And please give to Dr. Shaw a round of applause to thank him very much.
Cảm ơn anh rất nhiều. Kính thưa quý vị, người guest tới là một người rất là đặc biệt, một thiếu tá thủy quân chiến của Hoa Kỳ, một người tin tưởng vào chiến tranh Việt Nam. Các chiến sĩ Mỹ cũng như các chiến sĩ Việt Nam Cộng Hòa đã chiến đấu một cách rất anh dũng, hào hùng, và ông ta đã cùng với Trung tá Lê Bá Bình gặp nhau, nói chuyện về cuộc chiến, và sau cùng Richard Botkin đã ngồi xuống viết cuốn sách Ride the Thunder, một cuốn sách nói về sự can đảm và tình anh em quân đệ chi binh của Trung tá thủy quân lục chiến Lê Bá Bình cũng như là Captain Ripley của quân đội Hoa Kỳ. Và cuối cùng Trung tá Lê Bá Bình vào trại cải tạo của Cộng sản, và đại úy Ripley trở về Mỹ, bị coi như là baby killer, bị coi như là những người xấu xa nhất trở về sau khi đã hy sinh tánh mạng, hy sinh tất cả mọi thứ cho quê hương, tin tưởng vào tranh đấu cho tự do và độc lập. Ladies and gentlemen, our next guest is Richard Botkin, a good friend of mine. Please come up, Richard. He's the author, the executive producer of Ride the Thunder. He's not a major Hollywood big studio, but whatever he had, he put up for the money to make the movie from the family, because he believed South Vietnamese soldiers and American soldiers are heroes, and they're just victims of politicians. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard Botkin.
Xin chào, tôi tên là Richard Botkin. Tôi nói và tôi hiểu tiếng Việt một ít và không hà lắm.
Thank you, Joseph. It's indeed an honor for me to be here. I can't tell you how much I love the American Vietnamese community. I'm not worthy to be here. I love to hear the stories of the American Vietnamese, because yours is such a special story. And my friend Hung here, I'm disappointed that there aren't more young people here, because your freedom was bought at very high price. And it disturbs me that the American Vietnamese youth have become so American that they're not interested in their history. And it's absolutely critical. Before I go on, I want to say, Dr. Shaw, this is one of the most important books on Vietnam I've read. I've studied Vietnam now for about 15 years. I've read over 200 books. I consider this book to be one of two of my favorite books. I've read it 3 times. I'll read it again. Well done, sir. God bless you. The story of Vietnam is so complex, and yet, again, I'm not really worthy to tell it, but I feel like I'm a student here talking to my teachers. You are my teachers, and here's what I've learned from you. I want to share with you what I've learned from you. Unless and until you've learned the truth, the lies that you've been taught do not matter. The communists are liars. And what I've learned from my Vietnamese friends, Huy Van Lee and others here, you can't say enough bad things about communism.
Communism is so evil. You cannot overstate that. Today, every day in the media, we talk about the horrors of ISIS, the rapes, the beheadings, the murders. Well, there's nothing that they've done that the communists didn't do 100 times over. When I think about the 20th century, the last half of the 20th century, nearly 100 million people were killed by the communists in Russia, China, North Korea, Laos, Cambodia, Cuba, and Vietnam. 100 million people. It boggles the mind. As some of my Vietnamese friends have said to me, even the trees would leave if they could. Nobody likes communism. Only in America do we still think communism is okay, and I don't get it. I don't get it. And the sad thing, oh, okay, sorry, okay. Anyway, I am beside myself when I see how sympathetic in America the media, the colleges are to the communist stories. With all this truth, they call it revisionist history. It's the truth. When is the truth revisionist? It's just the truth. What I've also learned is that history will not be determined by the great books, unfortunately. No, Americans are too lazy to read. They read the sports page and they read People magazine. That's it. They don't know anything. I don't know if it's that way in Canada, Doc, but it's that way here in America. What I have learned is that it's going to be the film record that determines history. And right now, for the Vietnam War, the film record is Apocalypse Now, Platoon, Full Metal Jacket. Crazy movies, they're great entertainment, they've got good music, but they show the American soldiers negatively, they show American leadership negatively, and they show our Vietnamese allies even worse. And unfortunately, that will be the historical record, especially in 10, 15, 20 years when all of you are gone, and all that's left is the film record, and people are too lazy to read The Lost Mandate of Heaven. That scares me. We cannot leave history in the hands of the communists. We have to take it back. And I know most of you here are even older than I am. There's still one battle you have left to fight. We have to fight for truth, and we have to fight for the proper place in history. When the Americans went ashore in 1965, there were active insurgencies in every single country in Southeast Asia. Every single country. And even though we did not get the outcome that we hoped for, the American and joint South Vietnamese effort slowed communism down enough that the rest of Asia today is better off for that sacrifice. There are hundreds of millions of people in Southeast Asia who owe their freedom to the sacrifices that you have made. There's no doubt in my mind. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind, but we cannot abandon history to the communists. You have to tell your children, whom you're not the only, you've got to get your buddies involved. We've got to get people involved in the story, or else we're dead. We're losing right now. The good guys are not winning this battle. That's why we're trying to push our film forward, and we hope that there will be other efforts, because if we don't do it, if it's not us, then who? I don't know. I don't know. I'm reminded of the Apostle Paul in Galatians, where he said, let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a reward if we do not give up. We cannot give up. We have to keep pushing. We have to keep fighting. Unless we do, we lose, and the communists win. And we just can't do it. If we don't do it, it's going to be their version of history. They're the good guys, we're the bad guys. And we know that's not true. The lies stop now. The lies stop now. Thank you for having me. God bless you. Let's keep fighting.
Thank you so much, Richard Barkin. Thank you.